Hello, Data Bees. We have a couple early people. We're going to see that number kick off in just a minute. We'd love to know where you're joining us from today. Hello, everyone. I am from the East Bay. Okay, the Bay Area. Welcome, welcome. I know Robbie's over in Palo Alto. I can see our office. Tell us where you're joining us from. I'd love to see in the chat. I'm just going to go over the ground rules for today's webinar. We're so excited. We have such an incredible panel of all of these data privacy and governance experts and leaders in the field, and they are going to talk all about in SaaS We Trust, how SaaS services answer customers' risk requirements. Okay, so just real quick, we are going to ask these guys questions. That's why you're here, right? So please, to ask a question, instead of putting in the chat, please use the Q&A button. It's right below your screen. You're going to see a little Q&A button. And if you pop that up, you can ask the question in there. And you all can upvote for different questions that you want to see answered the most. So please ask your question in there. If I see it in the chat, I'm going to have to chase you down. So we love questions. This is being recorded. It's going to be sent out automatically tomorrow to everyone who's already registered. So if you have to hop off, or if you have a friend that couldn't join, don't worry, you're going to get the link for our YouTube page, and please feel free to share it. If you're going to be tweeting or sharing on social media, please use the hashtag HiveData. Without further ado, let me briefly tell you about what the Hive Think Tank does if you're new, and if you're a returning member. Hi, nice to see you again. So my name is Maddie Watt. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Senior Manager of People and Programs at the Hive. And one of the main focuses of my job is overseeing the Hive Think Tank. So the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, corporations, and thought leaders, and we are trying to nurture these discussions around thought leadership in terms of AI, blockchain, enterprise, fintech, health, and we're trying to lead that conversation with the most relevant voices in the game, which is why we have this amazing panel here today. And we're also featuring things on our blog that are related to our investment thesis. I'm going to drop all of these links in the chat, but we definitely want you to join the Hive Think Tank so you can stay up to date on all of our events, which are about every other week, except this week we're doing 2. So I will drop the link for that event next. Real quick, I want to say thanks to our sponsors. Next slide, please, Ravi. Thank you so much to our sponsors, TIBCO, Avantas, SAP, and IBM. You guys are amazing. If you want to learn more about how you can work with the Hive Think Tank, please email me. I will, again, drop my email in the chat. And then last thing before I give the mic over to TM Ravi, the Hive's managing director and founder, I want to tell you about the event we have this Thursday, and then the event we have next week, and then the other few events we have. So this Thursday, we're doing Battling Ransomware with Cybersecurity and Insurance. We are so proud to be co-hosting this with Avanta Ventures, which is one of our sponsors. And we are going to have some incredible speakers, as you can see on the left. I will drop the link for that. Next slide, Ravi. And that's this Thursday, 11 a.m., same time. And then next week, it's our Wednesday if you're in the United States, and if you're in Southeast Asia, it's going to be your Thursday. We are going to be holding an event on accelerating the digital revolution in Southeast Asia, and we are featuring our very own TM Ravi as the moderator. So you definitely want to sign up for that event too. And that is with the Hive Southeast Asia, which is our most recent office we've opened. And then 2 more, and then you guys are done. The AI Reading Club, this is so exciting. We are launching this new series. We're going to host it quarterly, and it's going to be an in-depth look at all of the most latest and greatest, or also the most important and relevant literature pieces that are coming out on different focuses within AI. So this first one will be all about probabilistic programming, and we are so proud to be doing this with Steve Omohandro, who is a reoccurring speaker at our events, along with his dear friends, George Gregory and Nikesh, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name. And then last but not least, we have an upcoming event that's not even online yet, and that will be with TIBCO, who is another one of our sponsors, and that's going to be focusing on computer vision applications and how they're transforming the industrial segment. So I will drop you all those links. Please ask questions. Without further ado, TM Ravi, and then our amazing panel.
Thank you, Maddie, and thank you for putting this together. So just a brief overview of the Hive. The Hive is a venture capital fund, and in particular, it's a subclass of venture capital that's called a venture studio. There are 2 things that are unique about the Hive. First is we are focused on AI related companies, companies that leverage data and AI to sort of disrupt their markets. The second unique aspect about the Hive is that we collaborate with entrepreneurs and in some cases corporations at the very early stage to create companies. So you can see a lot of our thematic areas of focus, and today you'll hear kind of a discussion around digital risk that Ray Everett is going to moderate. And finally, I just wanted to mention that in addition to the Hive here in the US, where we are on our fourth fund, we have separate funds in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Bangalore, India, in Malaysia, and later this year based in Dhahran and Riyadh, the Hive MENA, and next year in Berlin and Paris, the Hive Europe. So if you are external, if you are an international sort of entrepreneur, do reach out to us and we'll connect you to some of the right folks. I'm excited to introduce Ray Everett, who is the Chief Privacy Intelligence Officer, founding member of Data Secrets. Ray has the distinction of possibly being the first Chief Privacy Officer of a corporation. Most recently, he was the Chief Privacy Officer of Blackhawk Networks, and in the past has had roles at privacy-related roles at TrustArc, at Yahoo, at Keynote Systems. Who remembers Keynote Systems? And so I'll hand it over to Ray.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Maddie, for organizing this event. And thank you in advance to all of our speakers. We have a great panel today and a great opportunity to talk and share some ideas with you all about how SaaS companies are answering the risks of serving a diverse customer base, and how those customers demand data protection and privacy and security requirements of their vendors. And so we've got an excellent panel today. Joining us are Doug Luffman and Robin Andrus. Doug comes to us from Docusign, and Robin is at Twilio. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves. Let's start with Doug.
Thanks, Ray, and thank you, Ravi and Maddie, for the opportunity to speak today. So my name is Doug Luffman, Deputy General Counsel over at Docusign, and my role at the organization is we support the entire product function, as well as marketing, government affairs, as well as a large part of the transactional function within the organization, as well as innovation services and regulatory affairs, which is where privacy obviously fits in. And been in Silicon Valley for about 20 years, and pleasure to be here. Thanks.
And Doug also has the ignominious distinction of having sat next to me during law school. So he's survived none the worse for wear and has even thrived. So appreciate him still taking my calls these days.
Thanks,
Ray. And hand it to Robin to introduce herself. Hi, Robin.
Thanks, Ray and Doug. I'm Robin Andrus. I'm currently the Director of Privacy Governance here at Twilio, fast-growing tech company based in San Francisco. Currently in my current role, I manage many work streams of the privacy program, privacy by design, privacy engineering, privacy impact assessments, training, vendor selection, really, helping scale and grow Twilio's privacy program to be the best it can be. My experience in privacy also includes multiple roles at Google, Yahoo, and TrustArc as well. And my background before that actually was an internal risk and compliance auditor for Deloitte. So I come from a strong risk and compliance background as well.
Excellent, thank you. And that actually will lead us nicely into the first question, which is, as I sort of teed up at the beginning, the basis of this webinar and the real driver here is that many companies who are providing SaaS-based services and capabilities are increasingly requested and required by their customers to demonstrate solid privacy, security, and overall data governance practices. So Perhaps, Robin, you could start us off. What are some of the privacy and data governance requirements that customers bring to the table when they talk to Twilio and when they're thinking about engaging your services and products?
So I'll keep this high level because there's obviously a lot of questions that are being asked these days about SaaS companies, companies that are processing your data on behalf of, as a processor, on behalf of the controller, the company that wants to buy your services. You have to really follow the PII, right? The personally identifiable information and the data. And as a SaaS company, really, the customers are really trying to understand what data we're processing, where it's being stored, like where it's stored locally, how we secure it safely, security issues around this, what are the privacy and security controls, with our sales team. So it really is important to build a scalable privacy program that reflects all of these and have proper buy-in from the top. Doug, did you want to add in anything?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying, Robin. What I would add on top of that is I think there's also an element of a trust brand that needs to be taken into consideration as well, is that in addition to privacy policy, privacy governance, whether it's BCRs or the like, it's also your own as to really giving the customer comfort that what you're doing is something they're aware of. Whether they agree or not is another issue, but more specifically, just them going in fully disclosed as it relates to what is happening with the data. I think we're also seeing that quite a bit with the trends in the market, where the questionnaires as well as the regulations going on are really trying to instill that type of transparency as well.
And Doug, Docusign's business is deeply integrated into the sort of the business processes and workflows of organizations, particularly around signing of agreements that are going to have a lot of very sensitive information and both those documents as well as the PII around validating individuals who have signed and the like. Do you find that that sort of place within those workflows creates special challenges? I know, of course, Twilio also has a lot of capabilities that are integrated into authentication and whatnot. We can have Robin address that, but talk to us about how those deeper integrations around particularly sensitive activities are big drivers.
Yeah, sure. So because we have, I think we just announced over a million customers and a billion users, that we're ubiquitous in many respects with regard to not only who we engage with, but also the type of use cases that are engaged. And so that intimate relationship is definitely one that's enormously important. I think the way, and similar to kind of we were just talking about with Robin about kind of privacy generally, I think from the standpoint of the relationship with the customer, it's a balance between embracing protecting their confidentiality, using encryption obviously to restrict basically our ability even to access certain amounts of information that might be specific to the customer. For example, all of our transactions are encrypted, and so the only one with the public key is actually the customer on our e-signature side. Also recognizing that this sensitive information, because we have contract lifecycle management, we've got e-signature, we've got insights, we've got analytics and the like, it's a balance between giving the customer insights as it relates to what's in their repository of information they're using, and also enabling a very efficient way of doing digital workflow and benefiting from basically the intelligence as it relates to trends in the marketplace, as well as really just insights that they want to gain as it relates to kind of aggregating their data and having them be able to see kind of what the trends are to help with fraud and the like. And so I do think there's an intimate level where it's a combination of confidentiality, it's obviously the privacy regulations and adherence, and then it's also, of course, the contractual relationship that we might have with the customer as well. And having all three of those things fit together with obviously another eye towards is obviously the law enforcement element to it, as well as other kind of government action that we need to balance in addition to everything else.
Robin, at Twilio, you have you're deeply integrated into a lot of companies' workflows as well. The sort of capabilities and communication triggers that that are in some cases, I know in the past when I was a Chief Privacy Officer at Blackhawk Network, we utilized Twilio for helping with some of our authentication messaging and the like. So can you talk about how those sort of more even higher sensitivity activities really pushes Twilio to have a strong data governance message?
Yeah. So one of the things that actually brought me to Twilio almost 3 years ago was right after GDPR, they got BCRs, and my boss at the time, still my boss, has said, I want to come and build the best privacy program we can for our customers. And that really is something I resonated with and wanted to come do, because we had that, the buy-in, and to do that, to build the trust. And so, just if you think about our holistic kind of privacy and data governance program, we actually have binding corporate rules, which are a global framework that we are audited against on an annual basis to have the standard of GDPR compliance globally. But we take it a step above. We really like to think of ourselves as not just compliance, but also, governing around privacy and trust, and thinking about it holistically and building it through the organization. So, privacy by design throughout the whole organization, whether you're working with the product managers and the engineers and building out a product, like making sure it's built into their workflow and their processes. And then the same thing when we're processing, our employees' HR data, like that's also very important data that we need to take care of properly. Training and empowerment. So how can we, really empower our employees to also think about privacy and do it right? Is it more on the job training, or some more formalized custom classes we've built as well internally? And then, audit, like a sort of audit framework. We do have an internal audit. We have our BCR audit, and we're also even building out more robust auditing framework based on the NIST privacy NIST risk framework, and thinking about how can we really scale and grow our privacy program through these different work streams.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Doug, can you talk a little bit about what Robin was bringing us into, which is that idea of translating those requirements then into your organization's products, as well as sort of the structure of your privacy and data governance programs? How do you sort of close that loop from customer request and requirement to having a product or program that addresses those?
Yeah, great question. And to kind of jump up from where Robin was going with regard to the BCRs and the overall data governance, I think the takeaway that we have is that often many companies look at privacy as a requirement where it is just do enough to satisfy it. And we typically lean towards what Twilio is doing as well, which is, look, we have BCRs, which I think is a great way to go to actually be very, very public with regard to how we're organized, as well as it's obviously audited. In addition to that, is really setting the tone that it's really about data governance rather than privacy. That privacy is just one piece of the overall data governance model. And so we look at it that way, where it's the relationship with the customer, it's the data flow between the customer, our suppliers, our resellers and the like, and just making sure that how the data is flowing and how the customer is using the data all aligns with a business model that everyone is comfortable with. And so that's where we really kind of lean in, is that view that privacy and privacy by design is just one specific piece to a much larger relationship that we have with the customer, to give them access to their data, to allow them to be able to mine the data, to get additional insights from the data, and really look at data as part of the business model, and not from a business model from the standpoint of selling data, because I think that's often where it always seems to go, but more from the standpoint of enabling the customer to really be able to do better things quicker, faster, cheaper with regard to their business processes, by understanding what they're doing day to day, by being able to mine the data and understand how their operations are working, based on whether it's an e-signature flow, whether it's the digital transformation workflow process of how you get an agreement through the agreement cloud, and the like.
Can you tell me a little bit, Doug, about how you engage the other stakeholders in your organization to sort of keep them all in line with those sorts of requirements that you're hearing from customers, how to sort of build that buy-in that Robin was talking about of getting the organization all behind, something that is very sweeping like BCRs or even just getting all of your contracts aligned to deal with standard European standard contractual clauses and the like. How do you do that?
Well, I think it starts with the understanding the business, the overall business strategy for the company and how data factors into it. And then incorporating the BCRs, incorporating the privacy policy, incorporating basically the entire processes that you may manage your privacy program aligned with that. And so rather than leading with it's privacy, it's a requirement, you must do it. Instead, it's let's understand your data strategy. Let's understand how you ensure there's a pedigree as you understand what you can and can't do with the data. Let's understand where the PII information is, and let's understand how you're actually wanting to use the data, not only today, but in the future, and really showing it it's part of the ultimate business strategy around how it complements, whether it's the services you provide or really the trust brand that you're trying to generate by ensuring that it's really integrated. And similar to any other legal advice, it shouldn't be about having a legal requirement. It should be about how does this help facilitate and make you be able to go faster, cheaper, and more efficient with regard to your business. And by showing that business value, we have found that everything from developing it building it into the product to taking into consideration in our marketing campaigns to enter sales literature and everything in between, we get basically the business stakeholders really engaging quite closely.
Mm-hmm. Robin, for you, the same question. Sort of how do you engage with the other key stakeholders in your organization? What are some of the lessons learned along the way for making sure that everyone sort of is rowing in the same direction?
I have to second Doug's, vision of data governance and really building a strategy from the top, which is one of the things we're definitely working on scaling and improving as a company. It's really about at a more micro level, like embedding yourself with the different teams and relationships. So having that strategy, the tone from the top that Doug's talking about, and then having the right people, processes, and technology in place to integrate yourself systematically within the organization to put those processes in place. So education, empowerment, process improvement, and process flows.
Got it. Yeah, and just from my own past experience, I second both of your comments in that regard. The engagement and building those strong relationships is really, even more important sometimes than mustering all of the legal and technical arguments and having an impressive PowerPoint to show the value proposition of getting all of this right. Sometimes it's being able to get the right folks to take the meeting, to have the conversation, to get engaged, and to be engaged at a level so that you can understand sort of the pressures and issues within, the engineering team, the product team, the business development team, so that you can say, all right, here's how these changes or how these requirements will integrate nicely into your existing targets, your existing KPIs, or to be able to then really translate those requirements into something concrete and tangible, and to have the personal relationship to be able to get them to pay attention. So it's both sort of technical and detail, but also a strong interpersonal piece there.
Yeah, I definitely second that, Ray. When you're hiring for your team, or you really, try to find people that have, been in developed those relationships in-house and, kind of dealt with the objections from people who might not understand the why or how when we come and ask them to do something related to privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my tricks when I was doing a lot of consulting work was to get introduced very early on in the process to database administrators and sort of system architects. They're always very proud about the systems and the capabilities they've built, happy to talk about those details. And oftentimes they have a much greater sense of where the data is and how it's being used and what parts of the organization have come knocking on their door saying, oh, we need access to this. We need to alter an API. Even in my role at Data Secrets, we're seeing that stuff like APIs are really the linchpin of how data moves through an organization, and the folks who administer those are the stakeholders who you really need to be engaged with to understand where your risk is. Speaking of that ecosystem and all of those connections, something that was sort of alluded to here is that no organization is an island. SaaS providers have SaaS providers working for them that are parts of their ecosystem. Can you talk to me about, and I'll pose this question to Doug, how you then sort of convey those requirements down through your supplier and vendor network, your relationships with third parties, to make sure that you've got sort of a cohesive capability across all of your ecosystem.
Yeah, great question, Ray. The way that we typically start is we start from within, right, and make sure that it's clearly articulated what our approach is to establishing pedigrees, where we put the data, where's the system of record for it, how do we then have the controls in it, and then as we broaden out, it then of course is the next step is then engaging with the suppliers and making sure that as part of the diligence process, the suppliers are aligned with our philosophy in our approach, as well as the use case that's intended. And then of course, once you get into the contractual model, you then can potentially incorporate a lot of those kind of concepts, either just generally into standard T's and C's that are in it, or even in sort of an addendum that says, look, in this one specific instance, you are further enhancing maybe some of the data, and therefore we need this additional addendum of additional information that we need to either have assurances or a pedigree coming from you as well. And so it really is intended to be that the suppliers, as well as partners in our overall ecosystem, are all expected to be an extension of the way we do things, and to make sure that it's aligned, which makes it easier to ensure that everyone's going in the same direction.
Robin, same question. How do you sort of keep all of your downstream, if you will, aligned with the requirements from upstream?
Well, I'm not a lawyer like you and Doug are, and I feel like Doug gave the good overview of what you need to make sure you're doing from the contractual side. So, let's just you want to definitely make sure you're putting those right contracts in place with your vendors downstream, because they will agree to what is factual. But also, having some sort of vendor assessment and audit program. So to really, just like us being a SaaS product that people want to use or customers want to use, or Docusign, they are vetting us. They are vetting us to make sure we're safe. And it's the same thing when you vet your downstream vendors is, do you have a privacy program? Do you have a security program? What security certification by a third party do you have? So having a checklist and a process in place to really go through that and updating it annually. And then as well, wherever you can build controls, automated controls throughout the workflow is even better to improve your privacy program.
Got it. We have a question that came up. How do you deal with consumers and consumer requirements? Now I know Docusign engages directly with a lot of enterprises and corporations, but at the end of the day, they're individuals. Many of whom are they're asked to use Docusign sometimes for the first time when they're buying a house or engaging in something. where they need to create an account, provide some basic information, maybe download an app to their phone, or et cetera. Can you talk about sort of how you balance the customer requirements on a consumer-facing view rather than an enterprise view?
Yeah, I mean, we typically look to the consumer approach as probably the high watermark, in that we've seen it with the California legislation, we've seen with other states as well as even just the GDPR in general, is that enterprises are a bit more of the sophisticated user. And so rather than saying, well, the enterprise level is not as high and therefore not worry about it, we look to basically the gold standard of everything we do. And the rationale is, first, it is just the pragmatic way of achieving it, right? You want to get to the high water mark and just take pride in doing it, and also allows you to scale with regard to what you do going forward. So you don't have to have, this is the level that we need for the consumer, and this is the level we need for the enterprise, and this is the level we need for the small business, but rather say, this is the way we're treating data for everyone that we're engaged with. And it allows for really more of a consistent message being projected to everyone. And so we definitely do embrace a lot of the consumer legislation to ensure that we kind of align with it.
Robin, Twilio is a bit more of an enterprise-oriented organization, but you've engaged with more consumer-oriented products in the past, and have familiarity with these issues. How do you see sort of translating data governance issues and privacy protection into a more sort of consumer-facing message?
In general, when I go back to my consumer privacy product days of Google and Yahoo, thinking about all of the recent legislation that has been passed, like the CCPA, the CPRA coming up, and other ones. It's all of these changes are really good for the consumer at the end of the day. I know it's hard for a lot of the privacy professionals, but I do believe that there's been, this shift in the last 2 years of people are more aware of what privacy is. For example, my mother, I think she's 77. I think she thought I worked in security until a couple of years ago. So, but now like privacy is more of a thing. It's a household name. So, just really making sure that, if you're building a startup with privacy in mind, or working at a company, or even maybe if you're not in a privacy department at a company like marketing or engineering, is really thinking about if you're doing the right thing for the consumer and being aware of these regulations and laws. And if you're really doing the right thing, because I think that trust can go a long way in the future.
Thank you. We actually have a couple of different questions here, sort of going in the same vein, which is that the question of how organizations address both privacy capabilities and messaging, not just from sort of a program development standpoint, but also sort of tools and technologies that you use. Are there, what role does technology play in building out your privacy program, in monitoring your environment or your vendors, and how do you use things like software or technologies incorporated into your program to support those activities?
Yeah, so the encouraging thing is that we have been seeing a significant uptick in more mature tools. And I think if we talk about 20 years ago, it was literally running off of spreadsheets, and like even 10 years ago. And so what we are seeing now are ability to inventory the type of data, understanding the workflows, and having other types of technologies that allow for understanding what might be on your network. And the more and more that we are able to incorporate these tools, the more that we see kind of overlapping ways of looking at the data and the data flows to give us better assurances. And so we don't view that there's any one specific tool that is like the ultimate tool, but rather what we look at is one that's looking at it from the standpoint of what's utilizing APIs, another one looking at potentially the packets, or specifically maybe some sort of a data elements that you're able to identify where it might be coming from, to ensure that not only do you know what the data is or even the data flow, but also what tools and what services are actually running, not only on your network, but potentially other third parties that might be interfacing with your network to ensure that you have as much visibility as possible. And so what we do is not only do we look to obviously the product team and the CIO and the IT team, but also our information security team to really kind of get a sense of what sort of behavior is going on the network and ensuring that we can kind of then connect the dots to see what's going on.
Robin, anything to add to that?
I would definitely agree that the market for tools is maturing in the last year and so, and I'm seeing more promising privacy tech tools that are enabling AI and more automated than historically in the past, which is excellent because we're really looking for a scalable way to help mitigate risk, and that's where, as tech companies, we want to use technology to help mitigate those risks. So plus one, we are investing and researching and using more of the, automated AI machine learning type of privacy tech tools.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, at Data Secrets, we're building some of those same tools and capabilities, but I won't turn this into a sales pitch, but want to actually shift to sort of a related question, which is that our audience here, there's a lot of folks in startup scenarios. They're building new tools and technologies. Maybe they're not privacy tech particularly, but they're dealing with big data. They're dealing with a lot of personal information. What message would you have, from a larger, more mature company perspective for folks who are maybe looking to sell into your environment or to partner with you or to work alongside your capabilities? What's a good message for folks who are in the startup world, who are building these tools, who are also then, going to have to answer some of these same questions about their data governance program? Is this something they should be building for already, even at the startup stage? I'll give this one to Robin.
Thanks, Ray. I do have run across entrepreneurs who reach out to me and ask for feedback on their tools. I think what I'm seeing is, you're seeing a lot of either the compliance angle of like check the box, and this is a tool that will check the box, or it's an engineer that's more of, they're taking a technical approach, like let's use the AI to find the data. One of the tips I have given to some entrepreneurs is to think about your customer and who you're selling it to. Like Twilio's, one of our values is to wear the customer's shoes. So these tools are great because it'll find the data. But then if you think about it, is your customer, the head of data governance who's trying to identify and value the data, or is your customer security, or is your customer privacy compliance? And so also think about the marketing and sales aspect as well, not just the tech. Like the tech is the underlying basics that you need, but then who is your customer? Who are you really trying to sell to?
Ready, Doug?
Yeah, a bit of follow-up on that is the way that I would also look at it is that often startups think that having a server in their basement and calling that kind of enough to really be able to sell it into a big company, especially a public company, is not going to fly in this day and age with regard to privacy. And so I do think that SaaS has actually provided a vehicle for a lot of these companies to utilize the likes of AWS and Google Cloud and Azure and the like, to at least be able to put their technology on an infrastructure that has a lot of the bells and whistles and the security processes that they're really going to need. And so that's probably one of the things that I've typically advised entrepreneurs is, don't think about just the first generation proof of concept, but also how are you, when you sell it into a company, the more that you can use standard type of technologies and mature technologies that already have a lot of this built in, the more you're going to save time later in having to re-architect the technology and the products, as well as the more momentum you'll have around giving assurances, because you have that instant credibility when you say you're using one of these cloud platforms for building your services on top of it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. We talked about sort of what the nature of the requirements are that you get from customers, things that are sort of asked in terms of being able to demonstrate compliance capabilities and the like, contractual components as well. We've also alluded to and explicitly mentioned in a couple of cases changes in the law, new laws like in California, the CCPA is transforming into the new CPRA. Europe is sort of constantly evolving. We've got, hopefully, maybe, perhaps the new e-privacy directive evolution coming in the next year or two here. We've got the new standard contractual clauses that are keeping a lot of lawyers and a lot of privacy teams busy trying to figure out how to implement them. There's a lot going on. China's got a new data protection law that's been proposed as well. How do you keep track of these issues and changes, and how do you fold those into sort of the thinking and planning and development of products in your organization? I'll throw this one to Robin.
Sure, thanks, Ray. Yeah, privacy professionals are definitely really busy these days. I'm hoping the European regulators go on vacation this summer, but right. No, I mean, it's really interesting because it's great to see all this momentum, because we know there's being more laws and regulations around privacy, hopefully, for the best for consumers and companies. But no, I mean, we try to stay abreast by, working with doing the legal research. We have a team of lawyers who do the legal research, we break it down into actionable controls and, make sure we're meeting those controls through a controls framework and a GRC program, a governance, risk and privacy, governance, risk and compliance privacy program. But yeah, I mean, just having a systematic process to read the regulation, break it down, understand where it impacts us, and then see where we are and then remediate those gaps. So we're constantly working on that on a round the clock basis.
Yeah, similarly, as a public company, we do the same. What I always struggle with is when the entrepreneur or the startup asks, well, that's great when you have the resources to do all this, what do you do in the meantime? And the good news is that I do think there's a variety of law firms and other consultants out there that actually can help on this. And similarly, with regard to kind of the tools that we're seeing coming online, there are some tools that don't necessarily solve everything, but at least allow you to operationalize quite a bit of the kind of the processes that you want to bake in. And so I think it's really networking and talking to those that know how to do this and getting references to, key subject matter experts that can really cut through all the noise and really understand, what law or regulation should I be looking at, because you're not going to be able to look at everything. What you want to look at is which is the one that is the most heightened one. Try to comply with that, and then basically on an exceptions basis, look at what other deviations there might be and really try to be able to scale it.
Excellent. And I'll just put in a plug. I was a founding board member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. For those who are finding themselves increasingly in privacy related roles or having to deal with privacy requirements, even if you're not a privacy officer, the IAPP has excellent training programs, certification programs, and news and information that I know for me is how I learn about a lot of the activities in the space. So, a lot of this stuff hits the headlines, but there's a lot of detail and nuance and practical requirements that the industry leaders, folks like Doug and Robin and the other folks in the IAPP community are constantly giving feedback to the rest of the community and sharing it. It's a very collaborative community. So I'll put in a plug for IAPP training and membership. Wanted to shift gears a little bit into talking about metrics. It's exceedingly difficult in a lot of privacy and security spaces. A lot of privacy and security is measured by things that don't happen. You didn't get breached. You didn't lose control of this data. You didn't succumb to a ransomware attack, et cetera. How do you quantify privacy, security, data governance components in your organization in order to sort of both measure the success of your program as well as to perhaps justify the expenditure of resources, the budget line? How do you do that? Hand this one to Doug.
Proving a negative is always difficult. The good news is that there's enough people out there that are making mistakes that you take advantage of those mistakes by probably illustrating those in particular. Anytime there's a data breach, we evaluate those third parties and better understand basically what might have been the breakdown. The FTC, I think, recently came out with some consent decree recently. I think it's the FTC, which was around behavioral models and actually clawing back data and being able to make it clear that, look, if you do things in a manner that is not clean, you jeopardize not only getting negative press, but you also jeopardize potentially your business model or even your data and behavioral models. And so the goal is really to be in touch with what the trends are out there. And that goes back to, I think, the subject matter experts. To your point, the IAPP is a great one as well, where they have a great listserv where you can get a plethora of emails on things that are going on. But at least just keeping your pulse on the trends out there and then educating those key stakeholders, what's going on in the marketplace. And then when there's no noise coming from your organization, you can then do the comparison saying, this is what we're hearing outside of our ecosystem, and this is what's happening in our ecosystem. And because of the investment we've provided, we've been able to give assurances on this.
I know that when I was a privacy officer at Blackhawk Network, one of the metrics we used was, inquiries, requests for deletion or data access, both directly from consumers as well as being passed along from those customers for whom we worked as a service provider. Robin, are there any such metrics of that sort or sort of things that you, even if not hard numbers, but trends that you watch in order to help drive your either resource requirements or just to demonstrate the success of your program?
Definitely. I wouldn't say there's, if you think about like an analogy as like a Salesforce or a sales program that has like a really robust platform, and I think a lot of sales teams use the same metrics. I would say in general, like privacy program metrics are more in like an infancy stage, right? I think people are trying to figure out like, what are my metrics? What is valuable? What do I report up to the executives? What are my KPIs? So we definitely have a metrics program where, we use tools internally to report on things like how many vendor privacy reviews are we doing, how many DPAs are we signing, performing PIAs and DPIAs, data protection impact assessments, DSARs, data subject access requests. So we definitely track those just for staffing and trending analysis. And it's something we're definitely maturing as well.
Right. Another thing I think taking away from what Robin just said is also using those metrics to help in the different functions. For example, DSR requests or data subject requests. We actually circle them back up to the customer service group and say, look, we're hearing a lot of noise here, or circling up with the marketing team saying, did you just launch a marketing campaign, or actually tracking the marketing campaigns and seeing how the marketing campaigns then either increase or decrease DSRs going forward. And so really showing how our metrics correspond to giving more eyes and ears into what's going on in the ecosystem, I think further gets buy-in from the stakeholders as well as shows value as to the intelligence that you're providing.
Great. Before we run out of time here, I want to take a couple of the questions that we have in our Q&A panel. And if you have a question for the panelists, please click that Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom interface and ask away. One of the questions we have is interesting to me. Can you talk about sort of something that maybe a problem that you've experienced in a privacy or data governance situation where maybe you wish that there had been tools or capabilities that would have helped you address the problem? Are there are there particular gaps in the market, either for products or just challenges that you see recurring that are a sort of a constant source of pain for you? I'll go to Doug first on this one.
Yeah, I think we talked about earlier about the tools have gotten a lot better than they were, 5, 10 years ago. I still think there's room for improvement. I mean, the nirvana really would be a single tool to at least give you that insight into the data flow from where does the data at rest to where does it flow to, and associated, what type of data is flowing where, and really being able to kind of track that much more dynamically. Right now, it does feel like it's a little bit more of a patchwork of having to have multiple tools just to get the holistic picture. I would much prefer to have several tools, with one being the one that actually helps with the overarching one, and then, as I mentioned before, having overlapping additional analytics for tools to help validate that basically the flow that you're seeing is the full picture. But getting that full dynamic picture of what things are happening would be invaluable, I think, because then it shows what geo you're going into, where's the data stored, where's it being imported into, out of, what third-party data is being brought in, what is the pedigree of all the data, and then also, of course, in real time, it flagging, where is the risky data, risky behavior that you can at least look further into, just so it is more of a proactive way of doing it rather than reactive.
Robin, any challenges that you'd like to see somebody in
vendor does a little piece of that, but I like to think of it as, hopefully eventually we'll have the Workday or Salesforce of privacy, where it's so ubiquitous with privacy. Like we're, used to using, basically, like a lot of tech companies use Workday and Docusign and Salesforce. And so, people are just familiar with those tools and systems, but a lot of the privacy tech tools, we haven't found that nirvana, and we'll see where it goes, but yeah.
So we're getting down here to the last few minutes. So I want to sort of have one last kind of blue skies moment here. Can you tell me sort of where you see the next big challenges are? What's on your radar, both sort of near term and off in that beautiful distance that's in the image behind Robin's out Robin's window. Robin, you've got a view of the horizon there. Can you tell us what you're seeing as the next big challenges and how you're keeping on top of those?
Right now, a lot of it is really just staying on top of the new regulations, especially the ones coming out of the European Union around data localization. So that's really the new challenge, I feel like, for a lot of companies, is just, these new regulations that are coming down through court cases and making sure we're doing the right thing for our customers and being able to comply with them. And then just scaling, Twilio's grown really fast, and really just scaling our privacy program efficiently using tools and technologies to keep up with the business and support our customers.
Doug, same question for you. What's keeping you up at night? What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, short-term data localization, data sovereignty, I do think is one of the issues, and I think it goes even beyond EMEA. It's a protectionist type of approach that I think a lot of countries are starting to look into, as to, do you require local employees to only have access to the data? Do you require that you have to have a local data center in each geography? I think the good news in that is that we've at least seen some pushback from the standpoint of different types of industry groups, as well as even I think a G7 summit suggested that there was some support for recognizing that the free flow of data is critically important, and it's more about information security and trust. So I think short term, that's one area that I think will work its way out, because otherwise it's going to grind everything to a halt if it becomes too insular and isolating with regard to not allowing data to flow beyond each geography. Longer term, my worry is kind of an over rotation on just privacy and data regulations, where it exceeds basically what can be achieved by businesses and results in, and again, I think data localization is one example of it, but more generally, it's misunderstanding that data is a type of information that's probably another intellectual property asset in some respects, and at the same time, transparency is really the most important approach. But just not trying to legislate every protection into the law, because I think if you get to that point, it really will grind quite a bit of stuff to a halt with regard to putting too many barriers in place to really being able to do business and just increase costs.
Agreed. And I'll just chime in on that, you're definitely seeing, some laws in some jurisdictions that are being put forward as a security measure, but are, in some cases, much more about the security of the particular government rather than and the particular officials in that government rather than as a broader protective measure for consumers. You're also starting to see the interpretation of some of these rules and requirements in Europe, and I think increasingly elsewhere, where you're ratcheting down on how data can be used, or putting notification requirements on data usage that don't factor in the complexity of data movement and data requirements. So, in order for a particular activity to take place, data must pass between multiple points. And how do you provide notice along the way? And how does each of the service providers in a lengthy chain convey back up their responsibilities, their capabilities, their obligations? It's a lot of these laws are, many steps behind in terms of the complexity of the environment, and are going to clamp down or create obstacles and hurdles that are going to be increasingly challenging for companies who are not trying to do anything wrong. They're providing a service, and by all measures, consumers are valuing those services. But at the end of the day, you don't want a perfect privacy law to be the enemy of a good approach that may not be quite as burdensome as it could be, just for sake of some sort of philosophical level of protection that turns out to be unrealistic. So with that, we're coming to the top of the hour. We tremendously appreciate everyone's attention here. And let me hand this back to Maddie. But first, Doug, Robin, thank you so much for joining us for this. This has been very enlightening. And I hope you've gotten some value out of it. I know the audience has. I know I have. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me hand it back to Ravi and Maddie.
Thanks much, Ray.
I just want to thank Ray, Doug, and Robin. Thank you guys for an incredible session. I learned so much. I hope you guys did too. I had some good laughs along the way. And we would love for you guys, first of all, thank you all so much for joining in from around the world. And we would love to see you again on Thursday. I'm going to drop the link right here in the chat. That is going to be for our cybersecurity and ransomware and insurance event. So please sign up for that. And lastly, this event recording is going to be emailed out to you tomorrow automatically. So if you have a friend that couldn't make it, or some colleagues, send the link to them. And thanks so much for joining the Hive Think Tank. We love you guys. And we hope you have a great day. And thanks again to our speakers.
Thanks, everybody. Pleasure, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.